people, it's me, Anja, my pronouns all she and her, and welcome back to my channel for my 2024 reading wrap-up. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to title this video, however, typically I've titled the video with the amount of books that I read in that year, so I think I might just do that again. But anyway, today's video is about me telling you about my reading epiphanies as well as my reading stats of 2024. 2024 was a pretty solid reading year, although I know in the past few months I did complain a lot about my reading month. But I think that, like, overall, retrospectively, my reading was probably my best part of 2024, which says a lot because 2024 was not the best year for me overall. But anyway, let's just get started. I'm gonna start with my epiphanies. I feel like I realized and I learned a lot about my reading last year, so let's just get started. These are in no particular order, it's just a random list. So first of all, I learned that I dislike stories where the characters break the fourth wall and talk to the audience, because, like, the characters of a story are not supposed to know that I exist. So to me as a reader, it feels cringy, lazy, and unprofessional. So I really dislike it, especially like if it occurs multiple times throughout the story. Sometimes it's okay if it only happens once at the very beginning, but if it continues to happen, it's like so annoying to me, because like then I'm not immersed in the story anymore if the character isn't immersed in their own story because they keep talking to me. Related to that, I also don't like footnotes in the story because I think, again, they're really unnecessary. So anyway, second of all, I prefer thrillers over horror books. I remember telling my friend about this, and I remember that she texted me back and she was like, now that you say that, I don't know if I know the difference between a thriller and a horror, because technically I guess every horror is thrilling, but not every thriller has horror elements. And to me, the difference is that a thriller includes like everything that would happen in real life, whereas a horror might include like paranormal elements or supernatural or fantastical elements, whereas a thriller has none of that, in my opinion. Anyway, the third thing is that I dislike fantasies in first person. I definitely prefer fantasies that are in third person. The fourth thing, and I've said this before recently, I dislike enemies to lovers in straight contemporary settings because it's giving, if a boy is mean to you, that means that he likes you, which in the past would normalize and justify abusive relationships. So I don't like that. The fifth thing is that I prefer fantasies where characters move from place to place, but I prefer contemporaries where the characters stay in one place. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like in terms of like traveling and characters. Anyway, the sixth thing is that I love books with academic settings, which I've said before, but because the story is limited to the parameters of said setting, so it reminds me of like a sitcom. You know what I mean? Because a sitcom, if you didn't know, is short for situational comedy. An example of a sitcom is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where the majority of the storylines all centered around like the police precinct. So anyway, the seventh thing is that, in my 2023 reading wrap-up last year, I told myself, and I told you guys, that I was going to be more transparent in my recent reads videos and talk more about the 3-star books that I read between all of the 4-star and 5-star books I read. But I oftentimes didn't do that because since most of the books that I read no one else has, I figured that most people won't even know about the mediocre books that I read too. And when I was younger, it was because I was avoiding the anticipated disappointment from other readers when I would dislike really popular books. But now I hardly ever read really popular books, so that doesn't really matter. But I'm still underestimating how much people care about my opinions. With that said, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to not do that or do that in the future in my recent reads videos. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to end up doing. It'll depend on the day, honestly, because, again, I'm underestimating how much people care, because I was about to say that I don't know if people want that, because, like, my recent reads videos tend to underperform compared to my recommended reads videos, which sometimes randomly pop off. So, anyway, I don't know. The eighth thing on this list is Most of my anticipated releases of 2024 were really disappointing, which sucks because it means that I don't know my reading taste as well as I thought. I wasn't able to predict my 5-star reads as well as I wanted, which is related to my desire of controlling and being able to anticipate in my reading joy. Does that make any sense? I don't like surprises, and being disappointed sucks. Now, I know that there will always be things that you cannot control, and the more that you try to control things, at least in my experience, occasionally the more things can spiral out of control, and you have to let things spiral so that the spiral could end on its own sooner rather than later. Does that make any sense? Anyway, that's just my experience. However, number 9, I discovered new favorite authors this year, like R.F. Kuang, whom I've always heard of prior, but I said 4 years ago that I would never read her books, and then I ate my words rather, this year when I have read all of her books. And I'm so excited for her next book, which I think comes out in the middle of next year or something, I don't know. The cover was recently leaked on Twitter a few days ago, and it got a lot of mixed reviews, but I really like the green and like the font. I think it's so pretty. But anyway, as I was saying, I discovered new favorite authors this year, and retrospectively, most of my favorite books this year are written by familiar authors, so maybe I do know my reading taste better than I think that I do. So anyway, maybe, number 10, maybe I'm too hard on myself in general when it comes to my expectations, since again, the expectations are mine to create. With that said, I think I want to take more risks in 2025 because I don't want to settle on reading books that I know will be mid and instead try out newer books that may become new favorites, because at the end of the day, all of my now established favorite authors were once new authors that I had never heard of. Does that make any sense? Because like, when I think about my favorite authors, one of which comes to mind is Leigh Bardugo, whom I love, and a friend of mine recommended her books to me for the first time back in high school, I think. But like, and also like Amanda Foody, I had never heard of beforehand. I took quite a risk when I read the Ace of Shades trilogy, again, back in high school, and it was so good. And then I went and I read the rest of her books, which were also so amazing and so awesome. So anyway, the 12th item on this list is that I also want to read more historical fiction in 2025, because going into my reading stats by genre, I only read 28 historical fiction books, which is really not a lot. And then I read 119 fantasy books and 255 contemporary books, because honestly, when I was counting this, I was lazy. I only separated books into 3 separate categories because those are my 3 favorite genres of books. So before I get into what those categories really mean and what they each include, I read 402 books in 2024. 12 books I rated 5 stars, which sounds like I rated a 5-star book every month, but that's not exactly what happened, because October, November, and January, I didn't rate any books 5 stars, so in some months, I rated multiple books 5 stars, if that makes any sense. Like, for example, in September, I believe, is when I read Compound Fracture and The Dragon Republic, which I rated both 5 stars, if you remember. Anyway, my average rating was 3.6, going into my reading stats by month. In January, I read 32 books, February 34, March 35, April 27, May 41, June 36, July 38, August 26, September 23. Although in September, I also watched 11 movies that month, so I think that's why that number is a little lower. Anyway, in October 33, November 40, December 37. I know last year I went from worst to best, or from best to worst, I don't remember, but it was probably worst to best. Anyway, this year I wanted to go back to my roots and go in chronological order, so there's that. Like I said, by genre, I read 28 historical fiction books, 119 fantasy books, and 255 contemporary books. It doesn't really surprise me that contemporary is my most read genre, even though I prefer fantasy over contemporary, because as I've said in the past, contemporary is just easier to read, it's more digestible, and fantasy can be a little bit more complicated and a little harder to get into sometimes, because sometimes the world building is like harder to understand than a story that's set in real life, you know what I mean? And I think that historical fiction is just less published and less popular than fantasy or contemporary, at least in my experience. So it's harder to find new releases that are historical fiction. Anyway, so by the way, those categories, when I counted this, in fantasy I included horrors and urban fantasies and ghost stories, such as stories with paranormal elements to them. Contemporary, I included thrillers and books with alternate timelines, with one set in modern day, and science fiction and dystopian and magical realism, such as The 7-Year Slip, I put in contemporary, for example. And then historical fiction, I also included historical fantasies. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, those were my reading epiphanies and reading stats of 2024. I hope that you enjoy this video. I hope that you will continue to watch my videos this year. I'm not quite sure what kind of videos I will post in 2025, but probably the same types of videos that I posted last year and previous years. But I think also I might post more reading vlogs because I really enjoyed like my Babel reading vlog that I did last year. So anyway, with that said, if you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the strawberry emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.